Hi there, it's Celeste Headley of headwaytraining.org, here to continue my efforts to sort of help people understand the moment that we're in and why people are behaving the way that they are. I know from reading social media posts and blogs and even columns that a lot of people are saying, how could this group believe this? How could they do this? And so I want to talk to you today about cognitive dissonance and self-persuasion, because it might help you understand what's going on. Cognitive dissonance is the discrepancy that occurs in your mind when your external actions don't match the internal view that you have of yourself. So let's say that you think of yourself as an ally, as somebody who is anti-racist, who believes that people should not be discriminated against because of their personal identities, etc. And then let's say that you are a white person who puts cornrows in your hair, and someone says, hey, that's cultural appropriation, that's racist. You are going to experience some cognitive dissonance because the internal view you have of yourself as not being a mean, unfair person doesn't match with what they are telling you about your external actions, what you've done. And generally you can resolve cognitive dissonance in two ways. You can either modify your behavior so that your internal view and your external behavior align, and that reduces that sense of discomfort. I should say cognitive dissonance is very uncomfortable. We as a species do not enjoy it at all. It's painful. So you can modify your behavior. If someone says my cornrows are cultural appropriation, I take out the cornrows, right? Or you can modify your cognition to make these two things align. In other words, I can either change my behavior, I can take out the cornrows, or I can convince myself that wearing cornrows is not cultural appropriation. And therefore, my internal view of myself as being unbiased and anti-discrimination then aligns, because that's not discrimination, you're wrong. Or let's say that you are a manager of a team and you think of yourself as being super fair. And then someone points out to you that your team is almost entirely, especially your executive team, your leadership team is almost entirely white men. Again, cognitive dissonance, which is very painful to human beings. So you can either modify your behavior. You can say, okay, going forward, I'm going to make a really concerted effort to make sure that I hire people from a wide variety of experiences and backgrounds. Or you can modify your cognition. You can say, every single one of these people was the best person for the job. There was zero racism or discrimination involved in any of my decisions, and therefore my internal view of myself still aligns with the decisions I've made. Cognitive dissonance can be a wonderful thing. It can make you a much better person. But that's only true if you modify your behavior to match your internal view of yourself. You become a worse person if what you're doing is convincing yourself that your actions and your behaviors and your decisions are okay, in spite of what anybody else says about them. The first thing is what's called self-persuasion. It is so effective. You know, the vast majority of people do not score highly for hostile sexist views, hostile ageist views, hostile racist views. In other words, most people, nearly all of them, think of themselves as not being racist, not being discriminatory. But what that means is that because there still exists a great deal of bias and discrimination, and because every Homo sapiens is biased, it means that most of our views aren't hostile, but they are unconscious. They're motivated by the society in which we grew up. And that's where self-persuasion becomes so important. Because when someone says to you, hey, look, your entire leadership team is white men, you might think about that for a while. That might live in your subconscious for a while, the whole time being an uncomfortable thought. You might feel guilty about it. It might be like that grit of sand inside an oyster that could end up creating a pearl. If what happens is you say, you know what, that's correct. I'm a fair person, and it's clear that my decisions have not been fair, and therefore I'm going to modify my behavior. That's self-persuasion. And self-persuasion is so much more effective than any amount of haranguing somebody does to you, any amount of somebody yelling at you and calling you names or saying you're racist or whatever it may be. Examining your own decisions, thinking about them, cogitating, considering, that can often result in self-persuasion. And that's a beautiful, wonderful thing. But what's happened is, let's think about what's happened in recent years. Let's think about the murder of George Floyd, for example, and how shocking that was for so many white Americans to actually watch in real time what equated to a modern day lynching, the extrajudicial killing of an African American in plain view of a lot of witnesses. That was shocking to a lot of people, and it created a great deal of cognitive dissonance. Because if you think of America as being a mostly fair nation, a nation where civil rights are protected, where we are a democracy, then seeing that on your TV over and over and over again would cause cognitive dissonance. That video did not align with what many people thought about their own country. And they could resolve it in two ways. They could either change the policies, the procedures, try to address the systemic discrimination in the United States, or they could change their cognition to where they make it so that that was not an example of racism, to where what the police officer did was perfectly justified, or it was an outlier. They were the bad egg, right? They were the one bad apple. You could do it that way and then resolve the cognitive dissonance. And at first it looked in America like we were going to choose the first path. We had woken up, we'd realized that our American behaviors did not align with our American internal views of ourselves, and we were going to change our behaviors, our decisions. But what ended up happening, especially recently, is that people decided to resolve that cognitive dissonance by changing what they thought of the action, by making it align, by saying, no, it was okay. No, that was not an example of racism. No, it's not widespread, etc. So if you're looking at what's going on right now, it's just like the thing with the Confederate flag, which is absolutely, number one, wasn't the Confederate flag, but also is, of course, a symbol of the fight to enslave other human beings. You can either, if you like to fly the Confederate flag, you can either change your behavior and stop flying the Confederate flag, or you can change your thinking about it and say, no, it's not an example of wanting to enslave others. It's not a reflection of racism. It was about states' rights or whatever it may be. You can change your thinking about it to then resolve that cognitive dissonance. When somebody feels guilt, which is a really common byproduct of cognitive dissonance, that can lead to either something really great, or it can lead to something even worse. And we're seeing examples of both right now. So I hope that helps you understand a little bit of what's going on. Remember that cognitive dissonance, while painful, is also often super fertile and could lead to really great things. As always, have a wonderful day and be kind.